Dr. Morgan here. I'm really excited about this episode. We've got something juicy for you that we're going to talk about. I am going to dive into extinction bursts. Don't get worried. We'll explain it, what that means. And I also really want to talk about reciprocal or not at all. Just diving into what does that even mean, a reciprocal relationship. And then I also want to talk about fantasy and how fantasy sort of plays a role in our relationships. So some really exciting topics. I, as you all know, recently had a birthday. So appreciative of all of you who reached out and said happy birthday. Thank you so, so much. And maybe by now you have heard I am doing something I only do once a year, which is a live 3-day challenge. This challenge is the Move to Secure 3-day challenge. It's happening September 20th, 21st, 22nd. This is live coaching with me. You will get so much out of this time. Every year when I do this, people tell me that it's really, really helpful. So once again, I'm not doing this again in 2023. It is a ton of prep. It's a ton of work. And I do it because I care about you. I care about the audience, and I want you to have access to some coaching. So this is happening. Make sure you register. The link will be in my show notes here to register. Don't miss out. Last time we actually did max out. We filled up the registrations. There was no more room, and it happened way sooner than I thought. So if you know you want to come and you want to experience this, make sure you register ASAP. And that's my gift to you. I'm excited to hang out live. This is going to be better than it's ever been. It's going to be a blast. So get ready for that. Mark your calendars. We are going to have fun and we're going to heal together. All right. Today's episode, once again, I'm talking about extinction bursts and reciprocal relationships and fantasy. Some really good topics. So let's start with extinction bursts. If you have studied psychology of learning, you may have heard this term. This is when you are creating a new way of being and you're getting rid of old behaviors. And as you are getting rid of the old behaviors, you go through the extinction of the behavior, right? And then what happens is you will experience a burst, AKA a intense, large amount of the old behaviors. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you are working on becoming securely attached and and I see this all the time, so I can use the program as an example. You're in the Empowered.Secure.Loved program. You are becoming securely attached. You're learning how to have high self-worth and set boundaries and communicate assertively. And you have all these amazing things happen. And then maybe you're a few weeks into the program, you have great momentum. And then one night you go down an anxious attachment spiral. You are texting your ex 17 times. You're crying. You're having thoughts of low self-worth. You're not valuing yourself. You're not able to set boundaries. You can't communicate. And you're going, oh my gosh, I've completely regressed into my old ways of being. That is an example of an extinction burst. Because what happens is when we're getting rid of old behaviors, our brain got very comfortable with those behaviors. Our brain was like, wow, those are go-to responses to things in my environment. So now that you're saying, okay, we're no longer doing those behaviors and you're learning new ways of being, your brain goes, are you sure? Are you sure that we're done with these old ways of being? This is kind of like the brain going, I'm gonna erase this neural pathway, but let me just check with you before I do. Let me know, do you still want to have this option? Do you still want to have this way of responding available to you? Here's a reminder of what it's like for you to respond this way. And then you go through an extinction burst. And what happens is clients will come to me that are in the program. They'll say, oh my gosh, I totally backslid. I regressed, da, da, da. And then I get to explain this to them and they understand it. It makes total sense. And they're able to then realign with their securely attached self. So I want to throw it out there for any of you who are healing. And maybe this is even in other areas of your life. You're learning a new fitness routine. You're learning to respond to your body in different ways. You're learning to go for a walk when you feel stressed instead of binge Netflix. Like whatever behavior you're changing in your life, I want you to understand extinction bursts and realize that that could happen as you're making changes. And my hope for you is that it gives you compassion and that it allows you to realize, oh, my brain is changing, right? This is something that just popped up for me and I don't do this as frequently, yet I regressed into it. And that doesn't mean that I failed. It doesn't mean that the changes aren't working. It simply means that I am changing and that my brain is going, hey, are you sure you want to let go of this? And then you get to respond and say, yes, I'm sure. I do not like how I feel after insert behavior. I have decided to show up in different ways. I'm going to realign with my highest and best self. So I wonder how many of you can relate to this if you've ever experienced an extinction burst. I know I certainly went through this as I was healing my attachment style, doing the same work that I now teach people inside of the program. When I was doing that work myself, I went through extinction bursts where I was showing up secure. I was having incredible dates. I was really enjoying my love life. Felt really great. I had high self-worth, boundaries, assertive communication. And then boom, I would experience huge swings of either avoidant or anxious attachment. And thank goodness I have my psych of learning background and I was able to understand what was happening. And now I can tell you this, that it's different, the kinds of experiences I have, because yes, I show up securely attached most of the time. And occasionally I will experience anxious or avoidant attachment strategies. And that has more to do with triggers or feeling off. It's not to the level of what an extinction burst is. So anyways, I hope this is helpful to you. I hope it gives you some compassion. And now you know a new term. You can go impress your friends with that one. You can just say, hey, you're having an extinction burst. Hopefully it'll be a good conversation starter for you. Okay. The other thing I really want to dive into in this episode, this will be really good. I want to dive into fantasy. So for a lot of, and this is going to apply to avoidantly attached folks. Sometimes I get people who message me and they say, you don't talk enough about avoidant attachment. I get that. And here's the thing. You can have anxious and avoidant attachment styles that have similar behaviors. And the only thing that is different is the why behind the behaviors. So just think about that the behaviors could be the same, but the why could be different. And that is the case with this using fantasy. Here's the deal. For a lot of anxiously attached and avoidantly attached folks, fantasy can feel so much more comfortable than the reality of a relationship and the reality of intimacy that grows and gets deeper over time. One of the traps, and I bet a lot of you have been here, one of the traps that can happen because of this is the appeal of the long distance relationship. Oh my gosh. How many of you have been in that scenario where you're dating someone, maybe they're in a different town, a different country, like yours truly. That was one of my favorites, is if they lived in a different country. But you are dating someone and you're not able to build the day-to-day moments together. Fantasy can so easily develop in that scenario. This is also true if you are in the same city and you're both just extremely busy. That reminds me of my dating life in San Diego. It was like, get to see them maybe once a month because both of us are just entirely wrapped up in our own lives. And I was going through a very avoidantly attached period in my dating life when I was there. And it was just like, I could have a fantasy of who this person was and a fantasy of our relationship. And that was just so much more comfortable than the reality of being vulnerable, of actually getting to know each other, of actually spending time together, of seeing how we can handle conflict, right? Like, even if you're in the same city, fantasy might become more comfortable. So what happens is we have this fantasy, and then if you're with someone who is only allowing connection and intimacy on their terms, right? So like someone who is only comfortable with intimacy on their terms, like let's say you're on the receiving end of that, then you end up not being able to develop a real relationship. The relationship never moves out of the butterflies, fun fantasy zone, relationship la la land. It never moves out of there. It stays there, right? You've got somebody who's only allowing intimacy on their terms when they feel comfortable, whether that's you or your partner. This is how relationships become situationships and on again, off again scenarios, right? Like it can go on for years if it's stuck in the fantasy. And I just want to acknowledge this, that a lot of times when we haven't done our own healing work, that just feels so much more comfortable. I've been in that stage where I thought I was emotionally available. I thought I wanted a serious relationship, and I simply emotionally did not have the capacity to be deeply seen, to be deeply known, to receive love. There was no way that I wanted to actually develop real connection. I did not have the capacity for it. Even with anxious attachment, that can be true. So I just want to gently point out that if you're experiencing relationships that aren't going anywhere, it's time to consider, are you just more comfortable in the fantasy of not actually knowing, right? And this is where I want to remind you, when we're building real relationships, when it's relationships that do grow over time, where there's secure attachment and emotional availability and potential for lifelong partnership, when we're building those kinds of relationships, we need to remember reciprocal or not at all. Reciprocal is where I'm emotionally available and they're emotionally available, where we're both making an effort to get to know one another, where there's reciprocal emotional vulnerability that is earned over time, right? Emotional safety and the reality of knowing each other and knowing what goes on in each other's lives and knowing what each other struggle with and what is our careers and all the realities of life, right? Like reciprocal or not at all, you have to remember that if someone is only giving you intimacy on their terms, you are just accepting crumbs on their agenda, right? And then you're blocking the relationship space in your life. Your love doorway is being blocked by someone who's just giving you crumbs. And if it's only ever intimacy on their terms, the thing that's really interesting too is likely, if you are vulnerable and you are investing and you are emotionally available, that's not going to be attractive to that person, right? Like if they can't be emotionally available themselves, then you being emotionally available with them ultimately leads to them pulling away and the relationship ending. And you could be on either side of this equation, or you could have two people who are completely emotionally unavailable. And then this dance could maybe last and it'll probably just die out naturally. Just really want you to honestly evaluate, are you accepting crumbs? And are you more comfortable with fantasy instead of the reality? All right. I hope you enjoyed this episode. These are two of my favorite topics, talking about reciprocal investment and also extinction bursts. So I hope you got a lot out of it. And of course, if you're ready to do the work, I am ready to coach you. We have limited spots inside of the Empowered Secure Love program. So you can apply to the program using the link in the show notes or the link in my Instagram bio. We review your application. We will discuss with you to make sure that this is the absolute right fit for you right now. And if it's the right fit, you'll go through the program. And right now in August, this ends on August 31st, but right now you get a bonus month in the program. So that's a huge gift to you, huge value. And if you've been on the fence, this is your sign. Now is the time to apply to the program. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Maybe it broadened your relationship vocabulary with the term extinction bursts. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. That's how the podcast grows. So every time you leave a review, that's so, so helpful. All right, y'all. I'm wishing you high self-worth and great relationships. Until next time.